Okay, we are all set. We'll start the presentation. There are two witnesses, 19, and we start with Semyon. Semyon is representations. This is typical vision shown to the prophets, including Apostle John. And he was shown an elephant, which is not really an elephant, but it is a representation of something else. In this case, it is Republican Party or Republican candidate, and donkey represents Democrats. And the kicking is not really kicking, it's a defeating an election. And they kicked out of a building on which a US flag flies. And this cartoon appeared on the day after the election, presidential election results were announced. So we concluded this building has to be a White House. So it's how on the context we conclude certain things which misinformation. And this is how the Semyon works in a very high level. It is all representations, but Semyon itself has various ways the Semyon works. It is not as simple in every case. People have documented, especially a person called E.F. Bullinger. He has documented more than 100 figures of speech, and they get incredibly complex. The definitions, it is mind-boggling to go through each of the definition and remember that, and then apply that. And then there is a debate which of these figures of speech actually is this particular Semyon. So since God doesn't confuse us with so many definitions, he just gives us Semyon. As a teacher, I have a choice. I'm deciding not to go into complexities of these definitions. I will stick to Semyon, and case by case, we would evaluate how the Semyon works. It wouldn't work in the same way in every vision. So we have to, we see a slightly different way the Semyon is interpreted. When we come to the actual discernment, we will apply case by case analysis. So for now, just remember, Semyon is a very high level of representations, but at low levels, the representations could be a little bit vary from situation to situation. That's all I want to say about this diagram, and we will launch into the main presentation. Revelation 11, we started our study of two witnesses. Revelation 11 is the go-to chapter for two witnesses in book of Revelation. Let's recap quickly what we have been studying. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and them that worship therein. So here the spiritual temple of God is measured, those people who are worshiping God in spirit and in truth. So you have true worshipers and false worshipers or fake worshipers, and they are separated. They're separated because the temple is measured, and those who fall within the measuring line are considered part of the true temple, and who fall outside of this measuring line, they are no longer part of this temple. But the court outside, which is outside the temple, leave out and measure it not, for it is given to the Gentiles. These are spiritual Gentiles who are not part of the true church or true temple. So they were all outside. And the holy city, which is another name for this temple, or New Jerusalem, holy city, shall they tread underfoot 42 months. So for 42 months, a figurative Semyon period of time, the true church would be persecuted and trodden down by all the people that are not true church. That's how we can see. And I will give unto my two witnesses. So we were introduced to two witnesses. we are strongly in favor of and leaning towards the idea that the two witnesses are the true church. So that's what we are leaning towards, but we cannot absolute sense say this, but this is how we are leaning. If God moves us in a different direction, we will change. And I will give unto my two witnesses, probably same as the temple, and they shall prophesy 1,200 days, clothed in sackcloth. So it's a message in sackcloth. It's a message of repentance. It is also true gospel. So the two witnesses are doing the work of gospel, taking the sum total teachings of Son of God, and they're teaching every command whatsoever he commanded, and baptizing people in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, and redeeming many people, bringing into the discipleship of Christ. So that is the work of two witnesses. They are witnessing. It is their calling. And in fact, Gospel of John tells us the church, the true church, were also given very same commission of witnessing, or martyrs. And these are the two olive trees and two lampstands standing before the God of the earth. This is the verse 4 makes us lean towards that it is church, because lampstands are always representation of church, the true church. And the two olive trees, we went to Zechariah 4, where we found two olive trees. They are also two anointed ones, the king and priest. And no wonder we are also called kings and priests. Again, there are two witnesses. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. If any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. So the fire proceeds out of their mouth. We went to Jeremiah chapter, where we explored the semeion of this fire. It is no longer literal fire out of literal mouth, and it is a figurative semeion way. God tells that it is my word in the mouth of prophet Jeremiah would be like a fire, and it goes and consumes his enemies who are opposing my teaching out of my prophet. So it's a very semeion way. And this is exactly happening for the two witnesses as they preach and teach the truth, the true gospel. The fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours those who resist them. Those who accept and receive the true gospel, they would be saved, but others would be consumed. As in the case of Jeremiah, it did not happen immediately. Jeremiah preached and left, but eventually Babylonians came and decimated them. So that's how the fire is deferred, but fire would eventually come in the form of punishment and sometimes death. So in this manner, they be killed. Continuing verse 6 of Revelation 11, these have power or authority to shut the heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy. So shutting heaven that it rains not, takes us back to Elijah. We explored Elijah, what it happened, how it happened. And this is in terms of Baal worshippers versus true worshippers of Yahweh. So there's again division. And then he prayed that it rains not, and it rained not for 3.5 years, and there was a severe famine in Israel, land of Israel, and several people died. Horrendous things happened, and we went through that. So we have a semeion played out. So there is some kind of famine unleashed, if that is part of the church. Those who are not true church on the borderline, there's a famine of the hearing of word of God. That's one possibility. Second possibility is a physical famine. There's a shortage of food. So I think we are already experiencing in this world on a global scale. It's a frightening shortage is in progress, as many would believe that. And then the two witnesses, other than this, moreover, they are saying they would also turn the waters to blood. So this is a statement, we see it in the Egypt, Exodus, first plague on physical Egypt. So they turn waters unto blood. And this is by Moses and Aaron. Again, there are two witnesses. Moses is of the office of king and Aaron office of high priest. So you have king and priest, two anointed ones, two olive trees. So everything is connected to everything else. So here the two witnesses confronting Pharaoh, confronting Egyptians to deliver Israelites from the cruel bondage. So this is the scene. And interestingly, Revelation 11 verse 6 adds this last clause to this verse, to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. The all plagues, we understood that it is remaining 9 plagues on the Egypt, because the first one is to turn waters into the blood. So we are going through one by one. Now we have reached to the end of the list. Today we are going to do the last plague on Egypt, which is the death of firstborn. And we will just review the 2 more verses. And when they shall have finished their testimony or the witnessing, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. So that is the end of 2 witnesses, and they're witnessing this mysterious beast out of bottomless pit will make war and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord was also crucified. Here we are introduced 2 spiritual kingdoms or nations, spiritual Sodom and spiritual Egypt. As we are going through the plagues on physical Egypt, we must keep in mind, on the back of our mind, we are dealing with spiritual Egypt in book of Revelation. So the physical Egypt, physical plagues were history. They were recorded in Exodus. But in Revelation, you have 2 witnesses doing very similar work, but on not physical Egypt, but a spiritual Egypt and spiritual Sodom. And we have 3rd category called spiritual Babylon. So we have 3 spiritual nations or kingdoms, major players in the book of Revelation. And the 4th important hidden entity, another spiritual nation, is called spiritual Israel. So which is again true church. You and I are part of the spiritual Israel. So you have interplay of 4 spiritual nations we are seeing. So how the physical Israelites were delivered from physical Egypt, the Exodus, physical Exodus happened. So now we are talking and thinking about spiritual Exodus of spiritual Israel from spiritual Egypt. So that is the background. With this background, we will get back to the last plague, the death of the firstborn. So we went through all these things, turn water to blood. This is first plague. Frogs, second, gnats, flies, murrain or pestilence, boils, hail, locusts, and darkness. Last time we discussed darkness, and we took off for the July 4th, and this is the 10th plague. This is death of firstborn. It's an interesting plague. God calls it as plague, so we consider it as a plague. So the definition of plague is much broader and wider, and death of firstborn, that is the plague. And death of firstborn is a devastating blow to Egypt and to Pharaoh. Until such time, Pharaoh has been resisting to release Israelites. But with this final death blow, is done, is toast. And he has no other reason to hold off. When all the firstborn of Egypt died, he let the Israelites go. In fact, Egypt vomits out Israelites or thrusts them out because the pain and the crying is so great in magnitude and in the extent. Almost every family lost one of their firstborn. Historians assessed that it took 100 years for Egypt to recover. There is something in the firstborn of every family. They are called strength of the nation, strength of the family, and there is some hidden strength. We noticed that why it took so long for Egypt to recover. So much for that. And also behind the scenes, God was hardening the heart of Pharaoh to orchestrate this drama that unfolded. So each step, each plague has a step in a bigger plan, in a master plan of redemption of Israel from Egypt. So God has to orchestrate, and depending on his requirements and purposes, he went on hardening Pharaoh's heart, and sometimes all Egyptians' heart, that was also hardened. And here God does not harden the heart of Pharaoh this time. So it is a full death blow on Egypt. And finally, he gives up all the resistance. And after 10th plague, even though surprisingly, once Israelites leave and camp, and they're Red Sea on one side, and other side are mountains, and God again, one more time, one final time, God hardens the heart of Pharaoh, and he changes his mind and comes in a war with chariots, 600 chariots, and he, with his army, he pursues the Israelites, peaceful camping Israelites, and then you know the story. But this is last but one hardening for the darkness, but for 10th plague, no hardening. So he will let go. So this is the script we are going through. The script would be replayed again for spiritual Egypt, for the deliverance of spiritual Israel, not with Moses and Aaron, who represented physical two witnesses, but the spiritual two witnesses. And the spiritual two witnesses ultimately is Son of God and his Father. And in a way, the true church are also called the true witnesses. So they somehow play a major dominant role in redemption of spiritual Israel, the true church. Let's see and get familiar ourselves with the details of this last plague, the death of firstborn. And let's launch. This is the diagrammatic representation of the plagues. You have all the plagues. And you have death of firstborn, the last plague. We'll pick up the story in Exodus 11. Death of firstborn. And the Lord said unto Moses, yet will I bring one more plague upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards, he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out hence altogether. That's what God is prophesying. He will just thrust you out. He can't endure you anymore. In fact, in the last plague, we read that Pharaoh warns Moses that this is the last time you are seeing me. If you show yourself again to me, I will kill you. You will be killed. And Moses says, yes, that's right, fine. But here, Pharaoh, after the death of firstborn, he again calls Moses and Aaron and tells them, leave right now. So there's not much consistency in Pharaoh, even though he thinks he is great. Speak now in the ears of the people. That's what God is telling Moses and Aaron. And let every man borrow of his neighbor and every woman of her neighbor jewels of silver and jewels of gold. So God is instructing Israelites to ask. The borrow is a bad translation. The right translation is ask or request, or it could also mean demand, but I don't think they're demanding. God is telling them, ask them, because God will work in their favor. He will soften the hearts of Egyptians, so they would be more gentle and give them the jewelry that is needed for them to offer sacrifices to their God Yahweh. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses were very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, in the sight of the people. So people were seeing visible Moses, and they lifted up Moses, and he became very famous, very popular. Moses is now a celebrity in Egypt. Because they can't see the invisible God, they attribute the glory to the visible vessel. So isn't it ironic? Even people sometimes give greater glory to their pastors, ministers, teachers. They forget the invisible God who is empowering and moving them. So because they are Egyptians, they look what they can see. But we as spiritual Israelites, we should look beyond the physical vessels. It is the Almighty God, the holy, righteous God. He and his Son are behind the scenes, working and orchestrating these scripts. And Moses said, thus said the Lord. Now Moses said, thus said the Lord, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt. So God will go into the Egypt, in the midst of Egypt, in the midnight. And all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sits upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts. Basically, all the firstborn, either beast or man, they are going to die. It's a big, big onslaught. It's a big, big plague or punishment that is unleashed against Egypt. And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it anymore. So we have a signature statement here. God inserts this. There was never in the past like this, nor there is never going to be like this in future. Never in past, never in future. This is one-time occurrence. This is a signature statement. Where else do we see? We saw locusts, as told by Joel, prophet Joel. His locusts also are done like that. The attack of locusts is one time, never before, never after. We also see several other places. One of the interesting places is Great Tribulation in Matthew 24. Christ said, never in the past, never again in future. This is one-time occurrence, the Great Tribulation. We'll compile all the one-time occurrences in the history and try to put one beside other and try to make sense. Are they referring to same event, same phenomenon? At least we saw the Great Tribulation has some correlations to spiritual locust attack. So when he said Great Tribulation is in progress, perhaps in the behind the scenes, we have spiritual locusts in full attack mode. And is it possible that some kind of plague like this was also in progress behind the scenes? That's a question mark. And so wherever we find these signature statements, we pay special attention. Never in the past, never in future. Let's continue. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that ye may know that how the Lord do it put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel? So it's a metaphorical saying, I think Hebrew thing. Not a dog shall move his tongue. So they will not be affected by this plague, Israelites. So not a dog move his tongue. Where else do we see a dog move its tongue? The Lazarus and rich man. The dog comes and licks his wounds with his tongue, and Lazarus dies and carried to the bosom of Father Abraham. It's a picture of Christ in some ways, and the dog is devil. But here, Israelites were not touched by this dog. So there are lots of semeions built in, and let's continue. Verse 8, and all these thy servants shall come down unto me and bow down themselves unto me, saying, get thee out, and all the people that follow thee, and after that I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in great anger. So this is perhaps at the end of 9th plague, before leaving presence of Pharaoh. Moses is just telling what's going to happen. The final plague, the death of firstborn. And Pharaoh was angry and upset, and he said, last time I'm seeing you, if you show yourself, I will kill you. And Moses was also wroth and angry. With anger, he left the presence of Pharaoh. And continuing, verse 9, and the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that my words may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. So this is what God said for the 9th plague. Pharaoh is not going to hear you. And that's exactly what happened. And Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, that is first 9 plagues. And the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, that he would not let the children of Israel go out of his land. So this is for first 9 plagues. Now let's continue in the Exodus 12. From chapter 11, we are moving to chapter 12. Let's pick up the story in verse 1. And the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of the months, and it shall be first month of the year to you. So he's instituting the beginning of holidays, perhaps hinting at calendar. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. So the Passover ordinance is God is instituting for the ancient Israelites. Here, it's a very important thing. We should note that. And God discusses this plague, death of firstborn, the 10th plague, always in association with Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. Feast of Unleavened Bread. These are always associated with this plague. There are 2 important festivals. They're inseparable, because God declares this plague initially that it is going to come, and then he institutes Passover, and also institutes first the unleavened bread festival, and then he also institutes, commands Israelites to put blood to the doorposts, and so the blood on the doorposts, so doorpost blood, so this is the 3rd item. You cannot separate these 3 items from this plague. And after giving the instructions to Israelites about the killing of Passover lamb, applying the blood to the doorposts, lintels, and then the passing of death angel, and then the plague is unleashed. So you can't discuss in separation, in isolation, this plague. It always has to be discussed in context of these three items, because God puts them together. Who am I to separate them? So we will discuss with these three things in back of our mind and go through chapter 12. So you see lots of Passover, unleavened bread, and doorpost blood. So just get familiar. Once we go through this, and we will see what are the spiritual ramifications for this. Speak ye unto, we are in verse 3 of chapter 12, Exodus. Speak ye unto all the children of congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. This is very important principle. A lamb for a house. The house is very important. We'll come back to this. A lamb is always for house. There's a hidden concept of house. And if the household or house to be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. So if there are more number of people, you divide yourself into 2 lambs so that everybody has sufficient meat to eat the flesh of the lamb. If lamb is too big, you have only 2 people, you join with your neighbors so that 1 lamb is sufficient for 2 or 3 neighboring houses, but they all become 1 house, because 1 lamb, 1 house. That is the principle. And your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out of from the sheep or from goats. We know this pictures Christ, our Passover lamb. So without blemish, male of the first year, and taken out from sheep or goats, practical considerations. And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, that is Passover. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening, one time, simultaneously. And they shall take up of the blood and strike it on the 2 sides of the posts and on the upper door posts of the house, wherein they shall eat. So they're supposed to stay in the house and strike the lintels and the side posts with the blood of this Passover lamb, and they shall eat the flesh in that night, and roast with fire, and unleavened bread with bitter herbs they shall eat. So you have unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire. It's a whole burnt offering. That's what Christ did. That is the most pleasing to God of all the sacrifices, animal sacrifices. His head and with his legs and with potencies thereof, all the inward parts would all go into this fire. It's a whole burnt offering. Priest would not get anything out of it, or the person who is offering this sacrifice would not get out of it if it is a whole burnt offering. But here there is a necessity for them to eat this lamb. So, because later on people have to eat Christ. If you eat me, you would live off me. So the provision is made, even though it appears like a whole burnt offering, but meat is left for the people to eat. Yet ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remains of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. So this additional details. And thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, your staff on your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is Lord's Passover. So given instructions. For I will pass through, here we are coming back to the plague. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night. So God saying he will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. This is also important statement. Against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgment. In fact, Pharaoh is also considered God in those times, emperor worship. So this is a judgment against Pharaoh and all the Egyptian gods, because we see the parallel in Revelation. All the gods and the idols and the demons that people have, they would also be judged. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, when God sees the blood, I will pass over you. I will not decimate you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. There's an interesting catch here. If God is going to land of Egypt, why is he instructing this to Israelites? Because Israelites still in Goshen, away from the main portion where Egyptians live. That means God is passing through both Israel as well as Egypt. Is passing through that, a passing of the death angel, as we come to see. It would not see if a person or if the firstborn or if the house is Israelite house or Egyptian house. It doesn't care, or it doesn't care to know whether it is Israel, Israelite family or Egyptian family. What all the death angel cares is the blood on the lintels and side posts. If it sees the blood, it will pass through it. In hypothetical case, if any Egyptian house has a Passover lamb and they put blood to the lintels and the side posts, the death angel would have passed over that house of Egyptians. Conversely, if an Israelite family, Israelite house, failed to put blood on their doorposts and lintel, and if they happen to have a firstborn in their house, death angel would surely visit. That's what this is all means behind the scenes. So both Israelites and Egyptians were subject to this phenomenon of death angel in the night. But Israelites were given clear instructions. There is no reason for Israelites not to put blood. So that's how Israel is spared. But nevertheless, there are hidden requirements, that is blood. We see this later, the blood of Christ sprinkled on our conscience and our hearts. We would be spared by another passing of death angel. This death angel in physical Egypt caused physical death, but the death angel, second time, causes spiritual death in the lake of fire. Unless the death angel sees the blood of Christ sprinkled in our conscience, not on the physical homes, physical doorposts and lintels, because our consciences are purged. That means all our inward parts are purged with the sprinkling of blood of Son of God. And we were made cleanse inside spiritually. That is for spiritual Israel and true church. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial. So this whole event, sprinkling of blood on your house, is a memorial. And ye shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. No wonder when Jesus Christ, Yeshua, instituted Passover, he said exactly same things. Take this and eat this bread and drink this wine. This is the new covenant, and do this in memory of me. It's a memorial of what Christ did for you and me. No wonder these things come back. The script runs in a very intriguing, very exciting way. Continuing, verse 15, he also institutes unleavened bread feast. 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. So for spiritual Israel, you have to put spiritual leaven out of your spiritual houses, and 7 days represent the completion. 7 represents the total refinement and total completion and total maturity of church. So this would play out differently in Revelation. And on the first day, there shall be a holy convocation. And in the 7th day, there shall be a holy convocation. So these are major pivotal points in time, the beginning of this process and the end of this process of the conversion of church. That is the 7 days of unleavened bread. There are 2 important milestones. So they are holy convocations and annual Sabbaths. No manner of work shall be done in them, except that which every man must eat, that only may be done of you. You should keep on eating Christ. And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for this selfsame day I have brought you your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at even, ye shall eat unleavened bread until 21st day of the month at even. Continuing, verse 19 of chapter 12 of Exodus. 7 days shall there be no leaven found in your houses. Leaven is a type of hypocrisy, malice, sin, all kinds of evil things that Bible lists in New Testament, New Covenant. All that is represented by leaven. They should not be found inside our spiritual houses. For whosoever eats that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether it be a stranger or born in the land. Ye shall eat nothing leavened. In all your habitations shall you eat unleavened bread. Christ is the unleavened bread without sin. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover. So Passover lamb has to be killed. And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in basin, and strike the lintel and 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning. They have to remain inside their homes. And the bunch of hyssop, is it interesting? The hyssop keeps coming back when Christ was on cross and he thirsts, and they dip the hyssop in vinegar and gives it to them. Hyssop also occurs at several places in the leprosy ordinance. Also, it comes out. It's an interesting words. Continuing, verse 23 of Exodus 12. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And when he sees the blood upon the lintel and on the 2 side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. Here it's an interesting nuances here. We see he will not let the destroyer get into the house. So it's a strong indication that there is a death angel is employed or used by God. God, no doubt he passes through, but he has a destroyer underneath. So the destroyer was commanded not to enter into that house if it sees blood of the lamb on the lintel and the 2 side posts. So the destroyer would not come into your houses to smite you. And ye shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever. And it shall come to pass when ye be come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he has promised, that ye shall keep this service. They were told to continue this ordinance of keeping Passover and unleavened bread, because those are memorial of their deliverance from Egypt, sparing their firstborn while the firstborn of Egypt were decimated. There were several things being accomplished. And it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, what mean ye by this service? Why are you keeping this Passover and unleavened bread? Father, dad? Then you should answer and educate your children, that ye shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed their head and worshipped. And the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord had commanded, and Moses and Aaron, so did they. So God commanded Moses and Aaron, and they commanded children of Israel. Everybody did, and they killed the Passover lamb and struck the lintels and side posts to the blood, and everybody inside, nobody is outside. Close the windows, doors, stay inside. That's what everybody is ready. And it came to pass that at the midnight, the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. What a grim plague. Just happened in a second, probably. In a split second, it's a twinkling of an eye. I know in the Ten Commandments movie, they showed slow progression, but there is no evidence of like that. They dropped dead, all the firstborn of cattle as well as men. And the Pharaoh rose up in the night. Immediately they found that their firstborn is dead, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, but there was not a house where there was not one dead. What a sad outcome of stiff resistance and rebellion to Most High God. And he called for Moses. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron by night. He did not spare a minute. He just called them and said, rise up and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel. Go serve the Lord as you have said. Now he is giving permission for 3 days and 3 nights to travel into wilderness, according to the original plan, according to the original ask. Now you can go. I'm granting all that you asked. You go and serve your God. But things would take a different turn. They will not come back. They will just leave the Egypt for good. We'll see this. Verse 32, also take your flocks and your herds, and as ye have said, be gone, and bless me also. See here, the man, Pharaoh, now God has not hardened his heart. Now he is coming to his senses. He's asking, like, bless me also, please. Because Egyptians at this point are terrified. And they thought they're all gonna die. They thought the firstborn death is only one step, and the next step, maybe secondborns would be gone. So they're terrified. The fear of death is shaking every Egyptian. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste. For they said, we be all dead men. So they know the impact. And the people took their dough before it was, this is again coming back to Israelites, they took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. They are already packed up. The suitcases or all the bags, they are ready to leave. What an exciting time. And there's no time or place for the kneading troughs, for the leavening of the dough. They just prepared the dough and packed the doors, and they packed everything. They're ready to go in the morning. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed bad wood. They asked of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. Raiment is a very expensive item in those days, your clothing. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot, 600,000 men beside children. Some people estimate 2 million, including women and children, plus mixed multitude. Let's continue. Verse 38 of Exodus 12. And a mixed multitude went up also with them. So there are addition to 600,000 men, there are mixed multitude. We don't know about them. We can guess. And the flocks and herds and very much cattle. And they baked the unleavened cakes of the dough, which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any victual. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. So all the people, 70 people came to Egypt in the times of Joseph. Now they dwelt some 430 years. And this same day they would leave, exactly at the expiration of 430 years. We have to study this 430 years, the significance. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the self-same day, it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. And it is a night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out from the land of Egypt. That is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations. So night to be much observed. We have a tradition of that in churches of God. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover, and there shall no stranger eat thereof. So one of the requirements for the Passover is circumcision. The physical circumcision for physical Israel and physical Passover. When we come to spiritual Passover, it's a spiritual circumcision or circumcision of heart required to partake of the Passover. But every man's servant that is bought for money, when thou hast circumcised him, then he shall eat thereof. But a foreigner and a hired servant shall not eat thereof, because they are not circumcised. In one house shall it be eaten. Thou shalt not carry forth aught of the flesh abroad out of the house, neither shall ye break a bone thereof. So you have to keep the house, the meat of the lamb inside the house. You cannot take it to the other homes and share, because that lamb was meant for this house and people in the house, and they have to eat in that house from their lamb, because there's a personal relationship between the lamb and that particular house. It's a personal, intimate relationship between the lamb that shed its blood, and that's how granted them life from the death angel. There's an intimate, thankful, gratitude relationship with the lamb, which we see far greater way unfolded under the new covenant. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee, will keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised. And this is how the others have joined. Perhaps the multitude, mixed multitudes, they have to be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. So you can't eat the Passover lamb. You can't eat Christ unless you are circumcised in heart. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourns among you. So there's one law, no partiality. Thus did all the children of Israel, as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass the self same day that the Lord did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies. So I will pick up few important verses in chapter 13 instead of going through the whole chapter. Here, a very important focus you have to understand with this plague and with this Passover lamb and sparing the lives. All the second, third, and fourth born, etc., are not in the picture, not in the story really. It's a story essentially of the firstborn, either firstborn of Israel or firstborn of Egypt, and their death or their survival. The whole story and the plague revolves only around firstborn, because the firstborn is something very significant in a Simeon way. When we come to spiritual Israel in the New Covenant and to Revelation, they play a very, very important role, the firstborn and their survival. So here God, whoever he spared, the firstborn out of Israel because of the sacrifice of the lamb and the blood of the lamb, he claims ownership on them. You have to dedicate them to God because God sent his lamb and now they belong to him. They are owned by God in a very specific, in a special way. And God says, every male that opens the womb belongs to me. Exodus 13, next chapter, I'll pick up verses 8 and 9. Deliverance and memorial. And thou shalt show thy son in that day. So after many, many days, many generations, once they go into land, promised land, still their children might ask. Then you should reply them, this is done because of that which the Lord did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt. And it shall be for a sign unto thee upon thine hand, and for a memorial between thine eyes, that the Lord's law may be in thy mouth. For with strong hand as the Lord brought thee out of the Egypt. So this deliverance from Egypt, the death of firstborn and sparing of firstborn, and passing over of the death angel because of the blood of the lamb, and you become special to the God, special people, peculiar treasure, and you have to put God's law between your eyes and a sign upon thine hand. So here we have a signature statement on your forehead, on your hand. This is where the images play in Revelation. You have image of Christ and image of beast. Image of beast is enforced on the forehead and the hand, and image of Christ or the circumcision or sealing takes place also on the forehead of the spiritual children of Israel or true church, on their forehead. By implication, it's also on their hand, their works and their thoughts. So there are only two images when we come to Revelation, image of beast and image of Christ. So here is an interesting God, where the God puts this sealing and seal here with the deliverance of Egypt. So the true church is delivered from spiritual Israel, and once they are delivered from the clutches of spiritual Pharaoh, by the way he is Satan, and you have to keep the spiritual law between your eyes and on your hand, that is the image of Christ. You have a lot more things converging conceptually into this. Exodus 13, next chapter, same chapter, verses 12 to 16. I think this is important. Verse 12, that thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that opens the matrix, and every first thing that cometh of a beast which thou hast, all the males shall be lords. So God claims that every male that opens the womb, the firstborn, whether it is animal or man, belongs to God. Lords, it's an important principle because God spared them with the blood of the lamb doorposts. So Israelites' animals were also inside the house. They were also spared. The firstborn of animal and firstborn of men. And every firstling of an ass thou shalt redeem with a lamb, and if thou wilt not redeem it, then thou shalt break his neck. And all the firstborn of man among thy children shall thou redeem. So there's a concept of redemption introduced. Redeeming means an exchange with something else, and it's an agricultural term. You can redeem one animal with other animal. And it shall be when thy son asks, again, if thy son asks in time to come, saying, what is this, Dad? Then shalt thou say unto him, by strength of the hand of the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of bondage. It's a spiritual statement following a physical statement. It is not only physical Egypt, but is also a type of house of bondage with a strong hand of the Lord, because the Israelites could not deliver themselves from the clutches of Pharaoh. It is the strong hand of God has actually delivered them. They have to remember that. They should not forget that. They should tell their children why they are keeping these festivals and why they are putting between their eyes and in their hands the law of the Lord. And it should come to pass when Pharaoh would hardly let us go, they should tell the story that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of the Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore, I sacrifice to the Lord all that opens the matrix, being males, all the firstborn of my children I redeem. And it shall be taken for a token upon thine hand, and for the frontlets between thine eyes, for by strength of hand of the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt. Oh, wow. You have several concepts merging here. And I have a picture grabbed from internet. This is a painting, in oil painting, the death of firstborn. You see people lamenting here. Suddenly people drop dead, all the firstborn. And here some people drop dead. And there's a wailing and there's an anguish. There's a commotion. You see the whole land of Egypt. There is a huge cry. And let's quickly see what are the possibilities, how this plague would manifest in book of Revelation, because there is no direct parallel. We see every other plague, 9 plagues in Revelation, but we don't see this plague in hitting the firstborn of the world. But conceptually, it should hit. There are few possibilities. I quickly go through that. As I have mentioned before, only the firstborns are in the story. The whole story revolves around the firstborn. Now, when we come to spiritual realm, there are firstborns. There is first Adam. Before going this, I want to say you have Egyptian household. This is a house, Egyptian household. There is a firstborn and he is dead. And there is another Egyptian household. There's also firstborn, he is also dead. So you have several houses, Egyptian houses, all of them, they're dead. And you have a spiritual, there's a Israelite family, and there is a firstborn is spared. There's another Israelite household, and the firstborn is spared. So I will say Israelite family, and the firstborn is spared. Now, if you see, combine all these things, you see only two houses. The house of Egypt, and then you have house of Israel. There are two houses. And this house, Egypt, does not have blood. And this house of Israel has blood. That's the only difference. That's why the firstborn here and firstborn here are, one group is spared and other group were decimated. If you take animals, same thing. Animals here were spared, animals here were decimated. The blood made all the difference. And you have children of first Adam, firstborn are born of first Adam. First Adam. So all of us belong to the spiritual Egypt. This is spiritual Egypt. We're all born of firstborn. So we're also here. But when blood is applied to us, Christ, we come here, we become like this. So we are spared because of blood of Christ. So how these people got blood? They listened to word of God via Moses and Aaron. God's word, and killed the lamb and applied it to their posts. So Moses and Aaron are two witnesses. So here in spiritual realm, in Revelation, two witnesses are teaching the gospel of repentance and gospel. And then people applied the blood, children of first Adam, and they lived, even though they are firstborn. In fact, they are no longer firstborn, they become secondborn. In this sense, they are born again, secondborn, and they are children of second Adam, which is Christ. And now they belong to Christ and his Father, and they take the image of Christ. And others who have refused the gospel of the two witnesses, they would die, they would perish when the death angel visits. So the death angel is ordained by God at the end of the age that whoever refuses Christ and the new covenant, they would be decimated with second death in the lake of fire. So this is how I see things. And let's see, for the Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. So this makes a difference. Let us purge the old leaven and put on the new lump. And let us put the old leaven of malice and wickedness, put on the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth, which is Christ. Put on that if you are spiritual Israel. That brings us to the end of the presentation.